Hey everybody, Harv here. Let's get ready to rock and roll and let's continue our lecture into World War II. When we last left off, we were talking about the causes, kind of the prelude to the war, right? We talked about that failure of the Treaty of Versailles, how it helped give rise to the Great Depression, which obviously helped give rise to Hitler and Mussolini. Remember, Italians were really dissatisfied with the Treaty of Versailles, dissatisfied with World War One, and that allowed Mussolini and the fascists to take over. Right, the failure of appeasement, Neville Chamberlain giving up the Sudetenland, giving up Czechoslovakia to the Nazis. The failure of those collective security agreements, right, letting Hitler remilitarize the Rhineland. The League of Nations being all bark, no bite. The failure of all those pacts that were, renouncing war, denouncing war. They won't, solve their problems with war. The failure of that Washington Naval Conference to, kind of settle down everybody and prevent a naval arms race. It doesn't. The fact that the militarism of fascism, the fact that Hitler wanted a fight, he was looking for a fight, he wanted it, and simply Britain and France did not want one. So the war has started. It's September 1939. Okay, we have our major Axis powers: Germany, Italy, Japan, allied together. All right, and Germany is going to take over a lot of countries. There's a lot of war left to fight. Okay, but we know the Axis powers will lose. Spoiler alert. And the allies right now are Great Britain and France. Okay, so this is what our map kind of looks like early on the war. Remember, okay, Germany has already taken Czechoslovakia, taken Austria. All right, there's that Nazi-Soviet pact to divide up Poland, and that's going to allow Hitler to invade. Let's take a look at kind of the Axis powers right now in Europe. We know that Japan is over there in Asia. Okay, we have our allied powers right here. All right, we know Poland is going to be divided up. All right, here are major leaders. There's Winston Churchill, there's Hitler, there's Mussolini. All right, France will be led by de Gaulle. He will lead the Free French government after they fall. We know the Soviets are led by Stalin. Japan is led by a man named Tojo Hideki, and FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, is the president of the United States. All right. So this is kind of what our map is going to look like early in the war, and I'm going to go over it really quickly. So Germany has taken Poland. Remember, they had that Nazi-Soviet pact. They're going to split Poland up with Germany. The Nazis splits it up with the Soviets. And one of the reasons why, even you might be thinking, wait, aren't they, enemies? That aren't they going to fight in the war? Yeah, but prior to them fighting the war, even though they're ideological enemies, right? Far liberal, far conservative, they both shared a common goal of not believing in the Polish state. Remember, the partitions of Poland in the late 1700s. Both Germany, Austria, and Russia were all a part of that. Germany and Russia share the common idea that Poland should not exist, and so they're going to come to an agreement and divide it up. Russia getting the east, Germany getting the west, okay? But we are going to see Hitler quickly in 1940 unleash the Blitzkrieg in Denmark, in Norway, Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and take eventually down the French, okay? Let's get into it, okay? So Germany is going to use a brand new style of fighting that is super different and super revolutionary. It's called Blitzkrieg, okay? Okay. And what's revolutionary about it is it's lightning warfare. It's fast. The Germans, just take a look. I mean, just take a look in a couple months, okay? April all the way till June. That's April, May, June. That's a period of 3 months. Hitler's going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 countries. They move fast. Now let me talk about Blitzkrieg. Okay, let me talk about why it's so revolutionary. Number one is it's lightning warfare. It's fast. Okay, Hitler is going in his generals, Heinz Guderian, Rommel. They're trying to knock a country out really quickly. Germany doesn't have the biggest military, but they do have an advanced modern military. All right, so they're simply going to try to encircle armies and just cut them off and surround them really fast. Another thing that's brand new is how they utilize tanks, which I want to talk about. They use tanks in a concentrated way. Let me go back to the map really quickly. Traditional doctrine called for tanks to be mixed in with troops. So you would have, your infantry with a couple tanks, infantry supported by a couple tanks. Germans did something radically different. They concentrated their tanks. They put them all together in these big divisions called panzers. The Allies, Britain and France, actually had more tanks than the Germans, but they were all spread out. So when we see the Germans invade, and I'm going to talk about their invasion of France in a second, you're going to see the one portion of the German army, it's going to be right here in the Ardennes forest, is simply going to slice right through the French and British Belgian line, because it's just only tanks, and they're just gonna punch right through it and open up a huge gap, and then the troops will follow and they're gonna flow into France. So I want to quickly talk about the invasion of France. So the Allies, Britain and France, knew that Germany was going to invade. They just didn't know kind of how. And Germany had a plan. They divided their army up into 3 parts. I don't really quickly remember. It was A, B, C, but I don't know where everybody went. Part of the German army is going to be right here. It's the weakest part. Part of the German army is going to be right here. Okay. And then the biggest, most powerful, what the historians call the hammer, is going to be right here. Let me talk quickly about how the Germans did this, okay? It's quite interesting. So the French had the Maginot Line right here, and they put some of their army right here thinking that the Germans might come this way and they could easily defeat them. Well, the Germans know that their Maginot Line is there too, and so they're going to kind of put part of their army here just to keep the French busy. Now here, they're going to kind of redo the Schieffelin plan, but in a different way. So Germany is going to bring their army group this way down, take over the Netherlands, and come through Belgium. But the British and French were expecting that, and the Germans had an idea that the British and French would anticipate that. So the French and the British had this plan that if the Germans invade this way, they were going to bring their armies up to meet them this way. Okay, so the Germans are coming down this way, south, and the British and French are coming up north here. Well, the Germans secretly are going to put their main force right here. So once the British and the French go up, they're going to just come right through with their panzers and be able to encircle them. And that's why we're going to see Dunkirk. That's why we're going to see the fall of France so quickly. All right, so that's what happens, all right? The Germans start invading right here, all right? The British and the French go up to meet them right here. And they had no idea that the most powerful portion of the German military, all the panzers, okay, not all of them, the majority of them, okay, this big army group in the Ardennes forest was right here. And the French and the British didn't believe that an army of tanks and modern, armored cars and troops could go through the Ardennes. Well, they were wrong, okay? And the Germans come right through there, boom, encircle that army. Remember, the army's already up here. They encircle the army right here, boom, it's checkmate. Okay, and so that's how it goes. And so just in a span of a couple months, we see the French and British the French be forced to give up, and the British are going to have to escape. Dunkirk, very famous. We're going to see 300,000 British soldiers be pinned against the beach and saved by civilians. Fishing boats, trawlers, civilian boats, sailboats are going to come out. The British, and the saying goes, when the British couldn't get home, home came to go get them. The civilians went across the English Channel to go get them. And I think I have a little short animation to show you. Ooh, explosion. All right, Germans come right through. All right, and the British sent their boats to go save their soldiers. Okay, so take a look at how much territory Germany has acquired in just a couple of months. Okay, the war hasn't been even going on for a year. Germany's clearly winning. All right, and here is a very happy Adolf Hitler after the fall of France. He was very excited, very happy. This will also be a big problem for him, as he's going to become very arrogant, very overconfident. And this will eventually be one of his downfalls, we will see, because he believes that the same thing will happen when he attacks Russia, and it's not going to be the case for him there. Interesting side note is this is him getting ready to sign the armistice and the surrender of France. He is going to make France sign that armistice in the same train car that the Germans were forced to sign in World War I. They were forced to sign the peace treaty and that armistice for World War One in a train car. Hitler's going to bring that train car back and force the French to sign it in the same train car. That's basically Hitler just saying, hey, how does it feel? Okay, how does it feel to be on the other side now? All right. Now, there's one country left for him to deal with, and that is Britain, okay? And Britain has a new leader, and that's Winston Churchill. Now, Winston Churchill, we talked about him, very critical of Hitler, knew exactly what kind of man Hitler was, and he read his book. He read Mein Kampf. He knew exactly what he was dealing with, and a quote from Churchill is, "You can't negotiate with the tiger." And Winston Churchill is going to refuse to negotiate with Hitler, refuse to negotiate for peace. Churchill was a very powerful speaker, very, very attuned to the public. Churchill was adept at understanding the public. He would speak all the time. He's a very powerful, inspirational speaker. The speech that I have right here is his "We shall never surrender" speech. We'll fight on the beaches. We'll fight in the hills. But Winston Churchill was great at just understanding the pulse of his people. He would often ride the underground, the train with the people, and talk to them. When the Blitz is going on, he would go in the subway and speak to the people, be with them, and that really gave the people a lot of hope. It kind of created a lot of solidarity among British that everyone was in this together, and he was very effective at doing that. Very effective leader. Now, Hitler, very similar to Napoleon, he is trying to take out the British, and he wants to invade. Now we know Napoleon, being very similar to Hitler, Napoleon lost at the Battle of Trafalgar. Well, the battle that we're going to see Hitler lose is this Battle of Britain. Hitler is trying to gain air superiority over the British. He is going to be very close to achieving that, and he messes up for two reasons. Number one is he, instead of bombing the airfields and focusing on the Air Force, and the RAF, the Royal Air Force, he's going to start bombing London, and that will be a huge mistake that he makes. Okay. Another big mistake that he made was he underestimated the power of radar. That's a brand new invention that we see. The British had an intricate system of radar. They utilized it very effectively, and so they would know where the Germans were coming, and that was really helpful in them defending their island. Okay, and eventually we are going to see Germany lose the Battle of Britain, and they will be forced to abandon their invasion. And the planes that were really fighting, that were really helpful for the British, they had this new plane called the Spitfire, and the British had this plane called the Messerschmitt 109, the ME 109. Now, it's really important for us to understand that Churchill was waiting for the United States to get involved in the war, and the United States is not going to get in the war just yet. The United States will get in the war later on with Pearl Harbor, but the United States is isolationist at the early onset of this war. They do not want to get involved. You have some people looking across the Atlantic saying we need to get involved, but the majority of the people of Americans, they were dealing with the Great Depression. They saw that this conflict did not involve them, and it's only going to be with Pearl Harbor that the United States is going to jump and get involved. Okay, so we have Nazi Germany, all that craziness. Okay, they have defeated the French. We've seen Dunkirk. The British Expeditionary Force has been saved. France is gone. Germany has initiated the Blitz, all right, in order to try to take them out, and they lose. Okay, and this operation was called Operation Sea Lion. This was an all-out invasion of Britain by Germany. London was bombed all the time. The British did not quit, all right, and this was a failure. So Hitler, very similar to Napoleon, is never going to be able to take the British Isles. Okay? Very similar again. We are going to see the Germans, just like Napoleon, Hitler, just like Napoleon, attack Russia. And this is ultimately going to be part of his undoing. A huge, 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 huge mistake. Let's talk about it. So, and Winston Churchill knew, we've known that in reading Mein Kampf, many people knew that Hitler wanted Lebensraum. He wanted living space in the East, and so he is going to tell his generals to prepare for an attack on Russia. And he is going to call that Operation Barbarossa. Now, it was designed to destroy Russia before the winter, and we know how gnarly that Russian winter is. It decimated Napoleon's army. And the same thing's going to happen here. Hitler was delayed. Okay, it's delayed until June. I believe in May and April, Mussolini attacked the Greeks, and the Germans had to kind of delay their invasion in order to help Mussolini. And the Russians, when the attack went down, the Russians were completely surprised, even though they should never have been surprised. Many people were telling Stalin that the Germans were massing on their border. There was actually a couple German soldiers who defected because they made some mistakes that could have gotten themselves in trouble in Germany. They defected and said, "Hey, we're getting ready to invade. I'm going to tell you something. Can you offer me shelter?" and stuff like that. And the Russian soldiers and officers and commanders were like, "Oh, you're lying. You're crazy." And the Germans were like, "No, really, we're getting ready to invade." But actually, when the invasion went down, Stalin was so shocked, was so surprised, he didn't even believe it for the first couple days. The story goes, in the first day or 2 days, he didn't even allow his soldiers to fight back. Didn't even allow them to shoot at the Germans. He thought this was a ploy by Britain and France to get him into the war to help them. But no, it was actually true. The Germans were invading them. And the Russians were on the defensive. And early on in the war, the Russians were losing very, very, very badly. And part of the reason why is because of the purge. They'd killed a lot of their officers, killed a lot of their generals. They weren't prepared for the war. And they're going to get really lucky to get out of this in the first couple months, out of this alive. Hitler's, going to get about 10 miles away from Moscow. They got really close to taking them out. But the winter is going to set in. Stalin's going to get a note from some of his spies in Japan. The Japanese are not going to attack Russia. They're going to attack the United States. So he's going to take all of his troops in Asia, bring them on over into Europe, and that's going to help reinforce Moscow, save Moscow. And eventually we're going to see, with the winter set in, the Germans, that Blitzkrieg is going to be stopped. And it's going to be a fist fight on the Eastern Front, just a flat-out brawl. 20 million Russians are going to die on the Eastern Front. And a lot of people today, and from the American point of view, when they think about World War II, they think about D-Day, they think about the United States getting involved, Italy, North Africa. In my opinion, the heaviest fighting, where the war was really decided, was on the Eastern Front between Germany and Russia. That's where the heavy fighting was. And Russia played, I believe, the most significant role in stopping the Nazis. And they got a little help from that winter. That initial winter of 1941 was very cold. Gasoline would freeze in the tanks and fuel lines, freeze in the airplanes. It was a cold winter, and it helps defeat the Germans, just like Napoleon. And that's a big mistake. Okay. And we know that Hitler invaded the USSR to destroy communism, to get that Lebensraum, and to conquer the Russian landmass. Okay, so here we are by 1941. All those parts that are conquered by the Axis. All right, here are our allies. And this is what our map looks like. Let's take a look at the map. All the red is controlled by the Axis. All of that is controlled by the Axis powers. Here are our allies. And we have some neutral countries as well. Okay, so that's our map. All right. Now, and this is what Hitler's goals were right here. He had already established his Third Reich. He wanted to Germanize, colonize parts of Europe, especially the East, all right? So Hitler is fulfilling his plans. He is clearly winning. Now, we need to talk about Asia and talk about another factor in the war, and that's the Japanese. Okay, and this is where the war is going to start to really. There's another phase, and we're going to see the war kind of take another turn and go to another level, and that's with the Japanese attacking the United States. So Japan, small island nation, okay, about the size of California, and Japan in 1931 had already been fighting the Chinese, and they established a puppet state called Manchukuo, and they were beating the Chinese pretty badly. Now, one reason why they were beating the Chinese so badly was because China had been really ravaged by new imperialism, right? The Opium Wars, the Boxer Rebellion, all that instability going on during new imperialism, all those spheres of influence they had been taken advantage of economically, politically, legally. Also, during this time, there was a Chinese civil war between Chiang Kai-shek, the nationalists, more of the democratic leaning, and the communists, Mao Zedong. We will eventually see Mao Zedong win that civil war later. Okay, so here's kind of how Asia looks. All right, Manchukuo, Korea is part of the Japanese Empire. Okay, and we are going to see Japan launch an attack on China. Now, Japan is going to go after many Asian cultures and countries: the Chinese, the Koreans, Filipinos, Malaysians, Vietnamese. Okay, and what Japan wanted to do, ladies and gentlemen, was kind of create their own Japanese empire called the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, and they wanted to be this colonizer of Asian peoples. Now, then the big event happens. It's Pearl Harbor. Okay, the Japanese are going to launch a huge attack on the United States, okay? And the reason why they're going to do this is because the United States was telling Japan, yo, you need to stop with this whole aggression war in Asia. You need to stop. Now, Japan relied on the United States for a lot of their natural resources. Oil was the big one, but steel and iron. In order for the Japanese war machine to continue to work, well, they were reliant upon the United States for all these natural resources, and Japan is really small. They don't have all the natural resources in order to have this huge empire and this huge war machine. But so the United States is going to stop and say, we're not giving you any of this stuff, no more, no more. And so the Japanese were like, okay, well, if you're not with us, okay, you are against us, and they are going to launch the attack on Pearl Harbor, okay. So they said that this was they considered this a U.S. attempt to stop them from expanding their empire. So Hideki Tojo is going to order the Japanese Navy, led by Yamamoto, to launch the attack, and they're going to launch the attack in the morning on December 7th, 1941 in Hawaii. Now, Yamamoto has spent considerable time in the United States. He knew the United States very, very well, and he warned many Japanese leaders. The saying goes that after Pearl Harbor, many people say, General, we won a great victory, and Yamamoto simply said to them, I fear we have awakened a sleeping giant. And he was right. The United States is going to turn right around, and they're going to start pumping out guns, planes. The United States will be able to produce a bomber an hour in World War II. They're going to start pumping out ships. The United States is simply going to overwhelm much of the world, the Nazis and Japan, with their material industrial output. They're just going to be able to outproduce other countries. But Yamamoto said that this warned that this might turn out really bad. It's going to be tough we might be able to play around for a year or two with the United States, but eventually their industrial output is just going to be able to overcome us, and he was right. Okay, so Yamamoto's going to launch the attack, and it's going to devastate the United States Pacific Fleet. So the carriers are going to come out, launch the sneak attack with their planes, and they are going to bomb Hawaii. All right. Now the island that where Pearl Harbor is at is Oahu. Here are the Hawaiian Islands. Okay. Pearl Harbor's right here. All right. This is an aerial view of Pearl Harbor. Okay. And this is how Pearl Harbor looked like in the morning. Okay. You had Battleship Row. Now the Japanese also didn't make a huge mistake, but the United States got really lucky because while the majority of the fleet was here and is going to be destroyed, Battleship Row, a lot of these battleships are going to be destroyed, warfare had changed. And the Japanese are going to miss out on the most important ships in the United States fleet, that is the aircraft carriers. They were gone on a mission. And so the United States is going to get really lucky to keep those aircraft carriers. I believe it was the Lexington, the Yorktown, the Enterprise, and the Lexington, the Yorktown, the Enterprise, and the Hornet were all gone. Okay, here's some pictures of Pearl Harbor. Pretty incredible. There's lots of footage. You can see a ship right here capsized underwater. Okay, and so the United States is going to enter the war. And a couple days later, Germany and Italy will declare war on the United States, which seems very silly. All right, but that was Germany and Italy backing up their ally in Japan. All right, but now Hitler has enemies all over the world. Okay,